Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Tonight's talk will center around a sort of looking at how nature is moving through the sight of self aware beings. Pretty much how nature's vision is moving in the eyes of man. Pretty much how the natural world is witness to change. No movement can be a true movement without change. Now, how the world changes and how the change is interpreted are two different things. The world right now could be changing in incomprehensible ways. We might not have the sciences, the mathematics, the laws, a sort of even acknowledgement of other dimensions that could just be everywhere. In mathematics, there are these things called the millennium questions. Whoever solves these questions could give these kind of unsolvable questions proofs and theories. They get $1 million. And one of those questions was Fermat's last theorem, pretty much seeking a sort of complicated truth to proof to x squared plus y squared equals z squared. Now, in Fermat's last theorem, Andrew Wiles, Andrew Wales, was the person who managed to solve it. But when they accepted him as the solver of the problem, of this millennium problem, his answer, when they asked him, did Fermat, the dude who came up with the problem, you know, did he have the solution? And Andrew Wales, very uniquely, he said no, because the only way I was able to solve this ancient problem was with a new branch of mathematics that was not accessible at his time, at Fermat's time. So what I'm saying is, like, as if this dude needed a new branch of mathematics, totally a new kind of mathematics, to be able to solve that ancient problem. And when that new branch of mathematics wasn't accessible, the problem could not be solved. Right now, in humanity, when we look at the human condition, we are similarly in those shoes, where there are problems in this life where we cannot solve them unless there is a new branch, a new vision of the setting. You see, man is a social creature. He is a social animal. You cannot ignore this, you know? Any person who attains food, shelter, uh, water, health, they will eventually society. Because society is where your mind grows with your species. Now, the human being, it will acknowledge challenges in the moment. Like if you're a person who you have nothing challenging you in the day, you will instantly find life to be very empty. We need somebody to some sort of like, what is play? when you look at people playing around, it is a sort of pushing and a sort of pulling back kind of situation. You know, it is a battle of it's a kind of battle with no consequence, as if there's an acceptance of the positions that the individuals are. There's a comfort there in playfulness. For me, a lot playfulness is something huge. I notice it is the most important thing, because the unknown will make knowledge seem incredibly serious. It will make it seem so important that we will feel the stories of our lives are hanging by a thread. This is a saying. It's not said anywhere in ancient texts, but I personally say it. It's the playful enter paradise first, because they have understood God's mind. And God's mind is, in some sense, the laws of the universe, the looping program. It's very interesting for me. Western societies, they have their acknowledgement of this whole universal movement will be like a program. Okay, uh, the non-secular kind of Eastern societies, they are saying the world is run by an intelligence. The others are saying we are the intelligence in the world. Whether God is a program or the program is God, whether man chooses to personalize the collective unknown or not, personify the personal unknown through literature. Dear listeners, I'm simply trying to communicate here that we do not have just a relationship with other human beings. The moment is kept in many ways. In some of these ways that the moment is kept, you can consider them as states of being. Various ways the mind is in position, in some sort of existential, experiential position. Right now, as I'm speaking, my mind is in a certain experiential, existential position. But does this moment define the intensity and the journey of eons into now? It does not. And so my biggest realization was that, oh my God, all these new age gurus telling people to come to the here and now, Eckhart Tolle kind of people, what we will notice instantly is that they are actually taking people to linear chaos. Because if you were just here and now, you are defining your moment based on your existence more than your experience. When you define your moment based on your experience, the rules of the world become an unknown display. The forces can no longer be contained in definitions of the past. The past is broken. When the past breaks like glass, the future could never be slowed down. Sometimes in life, we have to make decisions. These decisions are very important because they will define us. I want the listeners and every human being to know this, that where your attention goes is suggesting the architecture of your destiny. How your attention moves in this life suggests the intelligence that is alive. And if your intelligence is boxed up, if it is caged, just like that quantum physicist, I think it was Niels Bohr, where he said they asked him, they're like, what is this? Explain to us, man. What is this quantum physics experiments you're doing? And the guy was like, listen to me, it is madness. And he didn't say it like that. I'm kind of animating it here, but what he actually said was that like it was like the experimentations at the time. This is not now. It's not recent. It's a while ago. The experimentations being done on nature in some sense. Sorry, guys, there was a phone call I had to attend to. But to continue, You see, the relationship of man with nature is a very unique one. It's as if man didn't exist, nature was here first, and then through the forces of life, nature appeared. Man appeared through nature. He opened his eyes in nature and he was an individual being. As he became more alert of its individual position, it's as if there came a unique change. It's as if the surface of the planet, if we really truly consider our biological existence to arrive from it, it's as if what is the planet doing making creatures out of nowhere? In other words, kind of like, where did this planet get the designs for a brain from? You know? And so, what we cannot understand at first, we must say an accident. What in some sense the scientists say is an accident, the the religious people say is a miracle. It's very hilarious. Eventually, you are going to see we're just human beings on a rock, and everybody's lighting up the world based on how their experiences have sculpted their beliefs. It has to do kind of like with maturity requiring to see more. Like somebody is more mature when they've seen the thing happen. There was like, I remember hearing Charles Bukowski. It was this YouTube video I was seeing. Charles Bukowski in this video, it was like his last interview before he died. And so he was this writer that suddenly he felt he got lucky and he made it, and he lived a hard life. And pretty much when you read Charles Bukowski's writings, he's kind of giving a inside scope into kind of like low living American realism. What that means is the harsh times of the citizen and the evolution of the social structure. He's giving you clear views of what kind of life he lived and the hardships, and how the hardships, in some sense, what they meant to him along the way. He's a really cool writer. Like his writing style, I really enjoy. It's like you're reading the words of an honest man, regardless of whatever wrong he did. In that last interview, the guy looks at Charles Bukowski and says, "Are you afraid of death?" And Charles Bukowski looks at the man and he's like, "No." Like, he says no, and he says in his articulate, like, in his unique speech and speaking style, I can't replicate it, but Charles Bukowski says, he says no, because things after a while begin looping. They begin repeating. When you begin seeing repetition in life, that's when you have to take a kind of reality check. You have to wonder about how the meaning is in some sense being extracted by your attention. Your attention is not just nothingness looking at somethingness. Your attention is an extraction. It's a transformation of objective reality into subjectivity. That is primarily the purpose of the free will. It is here to transform objectivity into subjectivity, kind of as if human beings suddenly, in this kind of statement, began vitiating all our academic departments in some sense, in the sense that the purpose of matter was to be thought. And when the human being really wonders about thought, I was like, how dare they? I've gotten, as much as I have in some sense, I felt I've been part of the glory, like the thing is, guys, I don't personally see a sort of identity to myself. This doesn't mean I don't have an identity. I consider language a technology that can be used anytime. But when I'm super still and silent and alone, when I'm like in my solitude, when I'm with the world alone, my relationship with the world is very different than when I am with people. It's as if there are levels of kind of authorization. It's like my attention is much more free. But, but, the point of life is not just freedom. If it was freedom, then how can I tell you? It's like, freedom will feel like enslavement if there's no challenge. For me, I'm like, all this energy, that is going from different human beings on this planet right now as I'm speaking, violently fighting. Right now as I'm speaking, you know, it's not just birth and death that's occurring. A great amount of change is occurring. Human beings are fighting. They're at war. They're killing one another. As if two living beings are looking at one another and they're like, one of us will stop breathing at the end of this. And this is tragic. It's kind of not, I don't want to say it's frightening. It's just dumb. You see? Because it is a waste, it's a resource waste. It's human resource waste. That's what violence is, right? We are wasting the ability. That person in the battlefield running in that war could have been a genius, but did he ever get the chance? No, he was just forced into a bulldozer of bullets. So we have to be very careful, you know, because it's our egos and pride can make our civilization incredibly inefficient. That's the danger. That's what happens when people start worshiping language. Then check this out. They start worshiping languages themselves. This is so unique. So I want you to see it in this kind of like, imagine like the evolutionary chart. This is Mr. Within's approach to what I think kind of happened in regards to the evolution of the concept of a creator in the minds of men. Okay? The thing was, Abrahamic religions kind of focus in on a sort of incident, especially, for example, the Western community, the secular societies really need to comprehend religious faiths because a lot of religions are dictating people's minds. It's as if the scientist or the secular member of society suddenly being like, oh, it's all bogus. By doing that, you will never understand who's walking beside you or who's standing beside you in the bus station. The world is filled with various kinds of people. What that means is it's not just people who have different colors of skin, they have different colors of ideology. But the only reason ideology becomes a matter of debate and discussion is because the ideas of one human being eventually lead to action. And if that action is inefficient for the civilization, there must be a sort of gaze of an enlightened society. You know, what I want to understand is that, you see, I expect something to happen which it didn't happen. I expected after 9/11, the September 11 attacks, for all the Muslims in the world to be like agitated by this. You see, when I, for example, see debates of Sam Harris with Majid Nawaz and various others with Douglas Murray, Brett Weinstein, Eric Weinstein, and another member who I can't remember, these people who were on this panel in this YouTube video, they were discussing these things. And they were discussing it in the sense that they were saying, like, okay, ideology can be very extreme. It can take over a person's mind. Do you see? This is why children, they must not at a young age just be fed ideology, or their will to live will be diminished by like 70% or something. This is why Japan's got it right. Japan, like as I've heard, it's like till the grade 5, like the 5 years of the educational system, they're just teaching personality, character, behavior, communication. It's as if it's too soon to put the kids' attention in a book, you know? The proper technology at the proper time will have incredible results. The proper technology at the wrong time, or the improper technology at the right time, will have the opposite results. So anyways, going back to this sort of evolution of the attention of man, you see, there was idol worship. In Abrahamic religions, the story of Abraham is very significant, especially to the Islamic and Christian traditions. Do you see? In the Islamic context, at least the way I've been introduced to it in my youth, is that Abraham, in some sense, was in this, saw a bunch of people worship idols in this room, okay? And Abraham's like, what are you guys doing? And these guys are like, we're worshiping our gods, man, leave us alone. And in that moment, Abraham is like, God is not a rock. God is not like a statue made of rock and twigs and leaves and feathers and whatnot, right? And so in that moment, the people were in the phase in history where they were worshiping idols. Now look at what happened. Abraham kind of, once these people are gone, breaks all the idols except one of them and puts a hammer beside him. An incredibly, very kind of like witty thing he does. And so when he does that, the people come back and they're like, oh my God, our gods are dead, are destroyed. Now, these people come and see their gods are broken. They look at Abraham and they're like, Abraham did it. Abraham's like, no, I was just standing here. This God with the hammer, he took the hammer and destroyed all the other gods. And then the other people are like, you're lying. That's just like wood and rock and leaves. That can't pick up a hammer. And Abraham's like, okay, then how can it be your God? And there's an incredible kind of leap in consciousness. I find an importance in our evolutionary kind of history that is not being studied. You see, it's not being brought into attention, but it was in some sense so significant. It was so significant because man stopped worshiping idols. Now look at where his attention went. After he stopped worshiping idols, he started worshiping subjects. After objects, we started worshiping subjects. And suddenly words and language became where our attention was running to. Language became the cave of the mind once objects could no longer be God. And in that cave, man made the subjects that were real to him. His imagination, for the first time, began entering his scope of attention. The imagination started to bloom in unique ways. Because if objective reality is not a God, then the language was the next thing, right? Language could be God. And so, believe it or not, after that moment, when words became governing worlds of the objective realm, pretty much a person who live functioning under a belief is like a word, a concept is telling you what to do in a changing world, you know? I say this very playfully. Jokingly, I say, you gotta have balls to have a belief in a changing world, you know? It's like, you know? So I admire the courage of the believers, yet at the same time, I do not comprehend the value of that belief. You see, it doesn't matter if I believe behind me there's an elephant or not. It's only when I turn around and directly experience the data that clarity comes. So it's totally understandable that a vast amount of human beings want to first see what's going on and then decide. But a vast amount of human beings also feel they've seen enough and the data from a sort of text and scripture is enough. And I'm saying that life is way more than the thoughts we accept, the thoughts we believe. Why is the presence of intelligence caging itself in a painted personality of some moment? So after we stopped worshiping objects, we started worshiping subjects. And guess what? This is going to shock you. Till 2019, even to this current day, we are saying we're all modern and advanced, but we are still worshiping ideas. And Mr. Within is here trying to say, stop the idea worship. Okay? We will never find an efficient blueprint to the civilization's advancement. When I say civilization, think of every living being on this rock. Every Homo sapien on this rock. We have to care if we want to change something consciously. If you notice this, you know why Love is an important truth. Love. Why it's something that most children shy away from, not realizing it is a kind of glory of the destiny. You see, love is being able to walk and accept. Or let me say it like this, it is a sort of innate submission to allow freedom. I don't know how to say it. I mean, I know how to say it, but without love, human communication could never get as far as it's like there was something needed to care. Albert Einstein tells us you cannot solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. That means whatever state you were when you saw the problem, when your mind could conceptualize a sort of problem to your life, you have to alter, you have to start seeing, you have to find that new branch of mathematics and use it, like Andrew Wales. So now the interesting thing, Mr. Within is not here just telling people to like take off ideas like boxes over their heads, you know. I'm not just saying that. I'm saying that's not, it's like you can't. It's not possible to go to everybody and say, please, sir, reconsider your whole life and your ideology system and value systems towards this existence and choose to have an efficient route. I mean, like, it's like you can't do that. You know, too many people. But what can you do? What can you do? You can see if people reached heaven, where will they go next? You try to find the heaven of heaven. You're trying to find the solution of all solutions. Pretty much we're looking for an integrative solution, and the integrative solutions for now are technology. The internet is one of them, miraculous. When I realized like there was the blessing of the internet, I was like, wow, wow, wow. It was kind of like somehow human beings had managed. There's this ancient mystical yogic notion of the Akashic records. Okay, I personally, before knowing even what the Akashic Records is, wrote a book called The Inventor Sphere, where I'm speaking about a sort of spherical, holistic moment where all data stands as one. It's as if they're all born in the same house. The elements are all born here, you know? Something I wish I could kind of go back and tell myself when I was younger was don't shy away from the world. You're made to be here. That's something I wish I could have told myself earlier. Because do you understand how, for how many years I felt a stranger to my planet? Like, forget people, just me as a person on this planet. The way I was raised, it was kind of dismissive of nature. When I was younger, I would kill ants. I would kill ants when I would see them. I would kill insects. Like I was like, ew, like like it was sort of respect. But then I eventually realized the value of living. Evolution totally recalibrated my value system, and so I remember I would sit in like I would sit in like nature in the like I how can I tell you? Nature for me was like a second home. Solitude in nature is divine. I don't know. I don't care what anyone says. It is. You will never be in nature and feel as if the world is not alive. And I got to a point where even ants would come and pass my hands, and they would journey over my hands like a mountain, and it wouldn't bother me. I reached a point where I'm like, why have I been letting this changing world bother me? It's changing anyways. And so there came this instant sort of kind of like hilarity for me, because life is a sort of paradoxical such situation. It's like there's an eternal urge for a creature to continue to survive eternally. At the same time, it's in a temporary playground. You know, so it's kind of like we're temporary beings trying to have eternal dreams. Like, you know, that's pretty much religion, is it not? And it's not even religion. It's how ideology appears. Ideology is like making an inner deal with you. No person believes something which it doesn't contribute to them, regardless of how much people say they are honest. They have to. It's like their eyes cannot ignore dishonesty. So that program, that just a recording of dishonest behavior, echoes in their system, right? And it's not like there's an inner battle. Your conscience is like, "Don't do it, man. Don't do it." But your ego and anger is like, "I have to." It's not like that kind of situation. The mind, you have to bring it back into your control. Think of it like suddenly this life is like a surfer on a surfboard, and the surfer is like is choosing to believe, have a sort of belief, so it's choosing not to move. He's just physically being like a statue on the. He's being like a statue on the surfboard. And so, the solution is you can't be a statue in this life. That's what beliefs do. They make you into a statue, and they, believe it or not, they make your mind stagnant. You have to, you gotta be like, this is something that only the advanced mystics would do. When something chaotic would happen, like when it's like they weren't only looking for good things in this life. They would watch all phenomena as it walks, as it moves, as it lives, as it knows it is alive. That is the greatest intelligence. You after scientifically after 4 billion years, do you know there were like what has led to the human being right now through a scientific lens is actually kind of like the survival of a very microscopic kind of intelligence. Do you know there's been a sort of a apocalypse that no living creature has survived? We consider in the history of this planet, no living being has survived, but on a bacterial level, maybe there's been continuity, and not maybe we're here now. And so this evolution, right, it began from a sort of small becoming big, eventually becoming so big that it could be aware that it is small, and then eventually see that life is big. The thing about karma is that people only see their karma. They don't realize the karma of the world. The karma of the world is how the laws of the universal sector are being applied. On some level, it is a wave. It's like from the center of our universal sector, there's like a wave coming. You see, your mind is a wave. It's a transient. We Human intelligence is the effect of a higher dimension cause. Simply said, that higher dimension cause is not in a dualistic framework. So this is why we are at the edge. The miracle can only be acknowledged. The accident can only be acknowledged when you're at the edge of the world. By the way, guys, I'm these these talks are a sort of me kind of preparing. Recently, I've had this feeling that, like this intuitive feeling, I'm kind of being drawn to some sort of public stage. I don't know when the stage is gonna find me, but so it's okay if anybody wants to ask questions. It's anyways. Um, it's kind of like a vast storification process. Um, Life has been put into stories. These stories have become the edge of our intellectual ability. Science is finding itself that people, it's like science's experiments are being reported to a sort of entity that is following a narrative base that entertains the unknown imagination and the known memory. You can never be a thought, because the notion of being something implies there's something outside of what you're being. You know, as if something, there must have been something there in order for that thing to be something else. Do you see? This is why beyond the language threshold, verbs are not, they don't animate in the mind that much. Life doesn't, is not action oriented, it is design oriented. So the higher dimensions of man's mind, this species, it's kind of hilarious because it won't activate unless there's collective efficiency, because that collective efficiency is required to bring about certain technologies. You see, it's not, we must think of it this way. Ray Kurzweil, this futurist, he says that in the year 2045 there's going to be a technological singularity, where in this where in this technological singularity, the technology that mankind, the sort of AI kind of creature, force that we unleash on this planet, it will be able to update itself quicker than the human being. So we will, in some sense, be in an inferior species. And the worst thing that can happen on this planet is we creating an illusion inside an illusion and fighting that illusion without ever living a real life, right? So for me, it's like we have to, it's a management. The leaders of humanity must not come here and govern human beings into groups like cattle. Like every nation has their own kind of cattle, and it's like this is us. Like what is this? The way human beings should be governed is by a change in the comprehension of the landscape, and the situation is kind of like this. There's human beings coming into this life, and they are traveling, and then they are exiting through their death, literally by dying. They die, they exit. Their intelligence and animated kind of manifest life is no longer continuing just based on the objective realm. They have become the thoughts and the winds that move those thoughts. And so what happens is that if you see the situation as people are just travelers in this world, we are here to realize, oh my God, it's as if human consciousness is a sort of existential tourism. There is attention touring existence. And we should begin to realize, in some sense, rather than having serious patterns of sort of structured way humans beings should live. It's like this is why the political system, from the moment it was made, was a sort of victory, but at the same time a sort of inevitable failure, because the political system can never adjust to the most evolved citizen of the community. What I'm trying to say is, like, they're all technologies. Governments are all technologies. This doesn't mean we should get rid of them. It just means we should think of a backup plan. Because I feel that nature gets rid of things whether man likes it or not. It's just like, you know, it has to do with the recognition that, imagine your own. I wanted to kind of bring in a notion that, like, what kind of world are we leaving behind for the children of our children's children? And some people might be here right now and they might not care for the family setting. You know, they might not care for the continuity of the species design and the value of intelligence. I'm pretty sure right now on this planet there's so many people who feel ashamed that they might never even engage. You know, and so this is very important. This is very important, the health of the species, which means where the attributeless attention of every every human being is going. I say attributeless because before you learned language, you didn't have attributes. If I tell you what attributes are, you can say nothing but words. This is kind of like the mystic's way of kind of dismantling every conversation ever had. Through a revelation that language is not the ultimate position, but it's a tool. You know, you got to use the tools properly. Like, you don't eat dinner with a wrench instead of a spoon. You know, you don't fix your car with a spoon, you know. So you see that the proper technology needs to be attempted and in some sense positioned. So for me, this life is very easy because it's all about planting seeds. The development is not that you should only want instantaneous gratification, because that's meaningless. Desires are a kind of a distraction of the greater efficiency of the concentration of the living. We have this very incredible poet by the name of Hafez. Hafez tells us, like, he has this very incredible line of poetry. This dude was alive 700 years ago, and and Hafez says, "One regret, dear world, I wish not to have before I die, is that I did not kiss you enough." And what that means is I did not uh, love the world enough when I was in it. You know, love doesn't mean strategic kind of mechanical success. It means seeing what the most valuable thing is, and it's the experience of human life, and it's at a very low quality. People are living shitty lives, okay? And I'm in a first world country saying this. If your attention was really on the condition of the world, you'd see something mind blowing. You'd see it's as if the inner life of the uneducated is much more simpler than the, in some sense, inner life of the educated. Because knowledge brings itself responsibility. This is why they said knowledge is power. Because knowledge is power, with great power comes great responsibility, and Spider-Man can testify. For me, it's all, I used to have my morality, my sense of right and wrong, be based by a story. I would let stories judge, be living beings for me. I would see a person, and it would be so easy to be, okay, that person's like that, okay, you know, like, it was so easy, the judgment. But I realized it's like, it's not a perfect system, but people are all trying to be perfect in it. It's a ridiculous game. I'm telling you. There are certain, I love society, but not the one we're in now. I love civilization. When I say society, I also consider all societies, you know. And the system, the institution of management must just be in trying to make the tourist have a better touring experience. This is why I feel the sooner nations can realize, like, stop their costume games, we can begin acknowledging a sort of universal condition. This universal condition doesn't have to per se mean that the nations have to all break. It doesn't mean like the United Nations is just one nation. It just means that we attempt to see how it is. Um, just a second, guys. I'm getting a phone call. Sorry about that, guys. How you value life will suggest the values you will attain from your experiences. If you don't care about something, even if that something wants to help you because you don't care, it's like nothing is retained in your sphere of awareness. When you see people, don't just see them as just their physical body. Think they have a sort of spherical awareness to that extends to their attention extends to even the sky, the edges of the sky. This spherical awareness is held under the impression of an identity. This identity is something the person in the linguistic realm can only communicate as being in a certain way, but it's actually changing all the time. As if I ask you, are you the same person that you were 10 years ago? You would say, no, my physical body has changed and my ideology and beliefs and experiences have been so much that I'm no longer the same kid. And I'll be like, okay, so if you are a changing being, how is it that when you see others and they are changing beings, you can define them? This is why language and communication then comes after the mystical inquiry. It's kind of like you either dissolve in silence and stillness, or you in some sense go at an infinite speed of communication. That means communication's goal is to be as fast as light, and that's like the inspiration of the linguistic simulation. Language is a sort of an effort for objectivity to return to the sun, as if every beam of light is kind of like uh, the taste of kind of like honey that makes the person be like, holy shit, there's something sweet there. Maybe that's not as much of a mystical metaphor as I usually say. Life is not just a dream, it is the reality of a dream. There is something here. And the attention can lead the personality to dissolve into just nature's movement. You can be a type of person like that. Like imagine Tarzan. Like imagine some person in the Castaway movie or something. Whatever environment the human being is put, they will adapt, and it's a testament to their intelligence and intellect, their adaptation, right? But in their adaptation, there is a sacrifice occurring. The person is choosing a certain set of behavior, whether right or wrong to them, and the intention behind it is very crucial because karma doesn't respond to your actions. You know why? Because this is why you can pray for something as much as you want and you might not get it. It's not, it doesn't have to do with your actions. It has to do with your intentions, and your intentions are a suggestion of a sort of availability. It's as if the reason you can't have some things in life is because you feel you can't have them. There is a sort of unauthorization of the evolutionary direction that the free will projects through the stage of memory and imagination, a sort of positioning of time. I feel the educational system has to update. It should have updated like, I don't know, 200 years ago. Or 400 years ago, whenever it was kind of born. There's this story where like right now it came to my mind, I'll share it. There's this kid runs to his parents and says, "Parents, I've seen something." And they're like, "Oh my God, our children is in the invisible friend phase." And then the child says to the parents, "I have seen God. I saw God when I was playing in the yard." And the parents are like, "What do you mean you saw God?" And he's like, "I saw the truth to everything." And the parents are like, "What do you mean you saw the truth to everything?" And the kid says, I cannot tell it. There's language cannot explain it." And the parents find themselves in such a shock that it's as if no longer an invisible friend, it is the invisible nature of space and how intelligence moves in it. We have to become aware of our subjective realms. We have to understand that a moment has a subjective, every moment of existence for the human being, it kind of like, not every moment, but like in your deep sleep, there is a sort of inactivity of thought formation, you know? Pretty much what I'm saying is how our attention as a moving intelligence surpasses the linguistic realm. It goes beyond the language threshold. Literally, the pilot of consciousness reaches the edge of that sky. It's like once you move beyond that atmosphere, the reason we have a sort of difference, the reason one environment is different from another, has to do with how it is informed. And how an environment is informed based on the interpreting mechanism of the intelligence of the human being, biological mechanism, like just like how we see an environment and then we wonder about it. That wonder is a sort of active presence of an intelligence. Okay, this active presence of an intelligence knows it is, and in some sense is wondering to see if other things is. Pretty much the mind is not convinced it is a body, and therefore the imagination runs wild. And the imagination of ancient times was much more wilder. It's like, just we see people were more savage back in the day, you know, in our evolutionary history, you know, we see at the same time their imaginations were also much more kind of, how can I tell you, their imaginations were, it was as wild as their sense of civility was. And this is why I find that we should respect the concept of God as a planet. Let me tell you why. Because when I look at religion, again, I'm emphasizing this, my viewpoint is that it's like art. It's incredible art. And art is an attempt. Okay? Now, if you use it's like if we use Picasso's painting, okay, to govern a nation, it doesn't make sense. You know? It's as if the political structure has been invaded by a subjective environment. And therefore, in the minds of men, the laws in their minds have to do with the subjective implication, how they feel a thought can imply reality. This is seldom said, but you know how you free the first thing a person should do if they want to free their world is you got to free the world from yourself. This is a very strange idea. Perhaps many will think of it this way. They'll be like, "What do you mean I got to free the world from myself?" It means this attention that is beaming out of your eyes and being the sensory perception, the sensory data is like how you're being this moment right now. It's being governed by an attention. Now, this attention is choosing to define itself by what is here, right? What it sees. But it's kind of like you free the truth from your sensory limited belief experience bias. That's what I'm saying. You stop the inefficient search for truth. And it's a hard thing because some people, they're searching for certain truths that it's kind of like occupying their life. That's kind of where loneliness takes you. It's like, what can a person left alone do? They just walk towards where they feel is true for them. Nature's vision in the eyes of man, it's kind of like how there's an existential field of intelligence that animates these winds, and these winds kind of move in the attention of people. They move through a sort of like, if you put your hand in the air and you felt the wind hitting it, that feeling of the wind hitting your hand is pretty much how language is moving, changing, you know? You must study language before uh, you can study anything else, to be honest. You have to study your relationship with your objective reality and your subjective reality. The objective realm, the subjective realm, the objective life, the subjective life. The subjective life is stretched out in time. Your subjective identity has a past, a future, and even it considers a sophisticated present. Yet, this idea, the idea of self is like the altar you're worshiping. When people live for themselves, it's as if they're saying what is real to me is more real than what is real to others. Da 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 da. They're just going in this life. There has to come a sort of proper chemistry, a proper alchemy, and a sort of balance between the inner reality and the outer reality. Right now, most people, their outer reality defines them, so they get stressed and like a lot of intensity and agitation arises because they are still, their inner reality is dependent on the outer reality. The inner reality has not been comprehended to be self-effulgent. Your mind can never die. What I mean by that is that uh, your brain will break, but your mind will not. Because the mind is not the you you're basing yourself on. It's just an observer. It's the presence of an attributeless observer. And the way I kind of retained this was, I had a memory, like one of my earliest memories in childhood is before I learned language. I was just a sight. It was as if the presence of vision. And it was kind of entering the linguistic realm, was kind of stepping out of the water into suddenly you breathe air as an individual identity and free will. We have to start thinking as a species, 8 billion of us, not as just people with certain emotional allegiances to certain ways that they feel that life should only be. We should be very conscious designers. That means we must be conscious of design prior to filling it up, coloring it with many stories. We must see the relationship that language truly has with the species. You see, an idea is like a collective being. When a group of people follow one idea, for me it's a scary thing because I'm seeing a blind giant moving in the streets of our humanity. And so it's very crucial. It's so crucial to be observant of how the world moves and how you move the world. And the systems aren't efficient. I'm telling you, it's like we're still in the caveman kind of situation, even though it's 2019 and I'm sitting on a chair with a laptop in front of me and a, cup of tea, like, even though there is the luxury of the modern technological age, at the same time, there is so many questions that are unknown. that we don't have time. It's kind of like an extinction of a humanity event. The educational system should just get the hardest, most challenging global problems and have every child in every grade, whichever child can contribute to it, will get a financial payment. Educational systems should be designed where you see like a lot of children play video games. When you see what are these video games, it's hilarious. It's quest based. Do you see? It's as if the person is being told to get something and they will get something, right? But when children come to class, they think they're only being something's only being taken from them. What they're being given, it's like the way it's being transmitted. Like the teacher speaks, it could totally be like you can't have one teacher for 20 people. I mean, of course, like how can I tell you? Um, that one teacher is very one-sided. The student doesn't feel engaged in the activity. They feel just as a viewer, like somebody sitting in a cinema. This is why the way the teachers in our educational system are now, they can instantly be replaced by just movies that are more exciting and more educational than the teacher. Do you see? So the educational system is coming to some sort of apocalypse. I find in the next 100 years, this will be displayed in some way. You know, and it's just I'm just seeing it as kind of like a chess player who's seeing a couple moves ahead where I feel it will head. Once the most important problems are at least in the conscious sphere of the children of humanity, we will suddenly see the imagination of youth give solutions to the problems of, you know, beyond youth, where it's more fixed, it's more situated. The creature in the social structure, as you move up the levels of society, at first you want to change it, but then you suddenly respect what is giving you value. And so you never, you become part of a program. It's as if, like, have you heard this idea, the easiest way to get rid of an enemy is to make it your friend? So similarly, rather than in some sense getting the person rebelling against the past technology, in some sense that person, you just give them a better job and they have no worries. For me, this notion came about, and it was so crucial, from this great TV show named what's it called, Black Mirror. And I think it was the second episode, that there is a system here and it's ancient and it seems like it doesn't care. Either people are gonna stay in it or they're gonna leave it. Two things will happen. People will either feel like it's going somewhere good, they'll stick around, or they feel it doesn't have a value and they'll leave. I feel the more a person is alive and the more laps they take around the sun on this planet, the more comfortable they get with how existence changes. It's as if you have been studying the changes of your mind since your conception. Even in deep sleep, some people think there's no attention. I mean, that's the firm belief. I have that notion too. But my deeper notion is simply that there is an awareness. There is an awareness where it's no longer situated in the body. The potential of your attention is that it's standing in the presence of a field of intelligence. That means you're not alone. Your mind can animate, in some sense, values, that whether you are in a collective sphere or not, whether you have the proper conditions or not, your mind can run forth. And for me, this came as a vision. It came as a vision where it was like, let me tell you, it was kind of like an alarm clock that sounded like an emergency kind of alarm, like suddenly an alarm clock went on, and suddenly I was pushed towards giving these talks by my own intuition, you know. And the reason was that alarm clock was this vision where in my eyes, it wasn't even me. I was just kind of like the space watching. And so there was, in that vision, I saw that it's as if this one being has been shot into a system. And because it's like, how can I tell you, it's like, in the vision I saw like this being kind of land on this earth, and then this being, before even being able to see what it is, in some sense seeing this wave, as if, imagine a being lands on this earth and then explodes into some sort of wave, a wind, a breeze that goes through all the streets. It was a sort of very unique kind of display in my mind. But when that vision came, the urgency, I could feel the urgency in that character in that vision. And that urgency was a call to not action. It was a call to inner action. That means the evolution of the external depends on the clarity of the internal. And behind our eyes, we have so many archetypes. Carl Jung kind of discussed this. He said the child has archetypes of the father, the archetypes of the mother, the archetypes of the evil guy, bad guy, good guy, savior, all these various archetypes that the person may have. Now, these archetypes, for example, Freud came and saw this and was like, whoa. And Freud was like, okay, people wanting God is like the archetype of the father. They still want the same, just like how they wanted their father to be with them, God in their imagination is becoming something like that. For example, there was that notion by Freud, which was a sort of secular psychologist. I'm not saying he was a good man, but I can't say he was bad either because his contributions are relevant. Eventually, not eventually, but Carl Jung, in his acknowledgement of these archetypes were kind of like where they truly were in the unconscious. And in some sense, later on, there came the development of the notion of the subconscious. And so, what it implies is like the subconscious is the bridge between the conscious reality and the unconscious reality. So, imagine you're occurring imagine when you're in deep sleep or when you're having a dream, right? Imagine while you're having a dream, like your hand moves in your sleep. Okay, you're in the dream right now, moving in the dream, but your hand suddenly moves in the dream. Imagine something pushes your hand, and suddenly your hand on the bed, imagine it moves. Okay. And so what that means is the character in the dream cannot know that the hand of the physical body outside the dream has moved. Do you see what I mean? So that movement of that hand, even though the person's conscious in their mind as a dream, you know, is a suggestion of an unconscious presence of your intelligence. That means you don't even know yourself to be able to measure your intelligence. This is why I feel the person who came up with the IQ test had a very low IQ. The reason is intelligence is too dynamic to be defined in accordance to just how quick your mind can articulate and solve geometrical and puzzles. For me, the beautiful thing is the mathematical language divides between numbers and geometry. And geometry is the free will's attempt to try to see the precision in nature or even have further views on the precision of nature. That means the fact that human beings are creatures even contemplating the notion of eternity is very fascinating. The fact that there is nothing eternal in this reality aside from just a sort of genetical continuity so far, you know, as far as the human being is concerned, it's eternal. Let me tell you why. Even though we're a temporary species, if there is extinction, that's when the eternity of evolution stops. physically. Non-physically, who can say? So guys, thanks for tuning in. Um, I am open to sort of discussion with the audience. These ideas I bring up, no man can own a thought. Thoughts just come and go at their time. Victor Hugo says nothing is more powerful than a thought than an idea in which its time has come, because that idea will define and become a part of many people's lives. And so the alertness of the species will eventually have to sit down. Every human being has to do this. You have to just find a very simple moment, go like in a park somewhere, and just sit still in silence somewhere. You can sit on a bench, you can sit on the grass, you could sit however you like, and for one moment, stop being yourself and just be a moment. Be a simple presence of a moment. It's as if no thought needs to define you. Time can't even tap you on the shoulder the way you're sitting. And so in that stillness and silence, the person will reach their not a neutral zone, kind of like not just the Buddhic middle way, but they will kind of reach a sort of attributeless beauty of being. See, in yoga, there's this concept of Satchidananda. Satchidananda literally means conscious existence is bliss. So whenever this consciousness, whatever it is, becomes in its stillness and silence and lack of ideas in being constantly imprinted on over objective phenomena, in that stillness, in that simple silence, the being begins to laugh and cry at the same time, because the ego is dissolving into the presence of nature. You're laughing because your true eyes are opening, but you're crying because your old eyes are being closed for. There's a sort of transformation of how the existential attention is choosing to be a character. It is no longer choosing to be a character just based on the mind, the vision of the self, or the vision of the other. It is becoming the watcher of all watchers. The night's watch of the night's watch. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Our world is more important than our beliefs. The efficiency of the civilization is more important than the stories of morality. Nature is moving as us and through us. We are the kind of end result of nature so far, those who are alive. And life brings itself not a burden, not a weight, a sort of heaviness of suffering. It's not that that's what life is kind of bringing. Life is showing you something, and that's it. And that's the true meaning of living, that you are walking in every moment as you are, as the world is, a sort of freedom from an ideological establishment, yet you can color the world in as much complexity as you want. You become free because you see the emptiness before the fullness. We can say death is emptiness to a creature who is being defined by form. It's like the formless is death, is like the transition of the formless to the formless. And this moment, when I say it's attributeless, I am saying something very, very intense. I'm saying that because the watcher, the observer, is attributeless, it doesn't matter if it's alive or dead. That's the power of the field of intelligence, that one can consider the mind is an expression and kind of a wave in an ocean of. And what that means is the wave is not separate from the ocean. On some level, human beings all around the world know that it's one world. as nature's vision, as nature finds its vision in the eyes of man. All realities have advanced towards the allowance of novelties, methods, to allow the unknown to recalibrate your knowledge. That is the true teaching. Because if you went and ask to any teacher, and they're like, "Who's your teacher, man?" And he would say, "My teacher is this guy," and you see that guy's like was dead like 100 years ago, and you'd be like, "Okay, man." You know, it's like you'd eventually see the greatest teacher is the one that makes the student surpass the teacher, because then the world has a better chance. This is why it's kind of like if the ethics are not based on a survival selfish game, they suddenly become dependent on the collective efficiency, as if human beings are waking up and they're like, okay, it's one lifetime, let me see how great humanity can be. And they march in the streets towards however way they can make their civilization advance, you know, make their civilization stand in a better way. It's all about quality control. It's all about like the experience human beings are going and the kind of fields we can create. And if imagine like all the governing institutions were like, okay, human beings need order, and they started trying to make everything follow a sort of order, they're going to see people are going to be like, nah, man, I want to get a chaotic experience. And so the entity in some sense is being defined by various activities of the intelligence. The issue is evil activities are more entertaining because they have more of an opportunity cost, more of a loss. It's as if more of a sacrifice, you know? And so the issue is that those same sacrifices and all that could be done inefficiently. When two people fight in the streets, if you had both of those people in some sort of creative room or virtual reality arena conceptualizing the next theories of the modern world, like it's as if it's the value. It's like where what your expression is leading. Anyways, thanks for tuning in, guys. Much blessings and namaste.